All right. There we go. So how's it going, everybody? It's good to see people in here. So there are, well, first of all, how was your week? Hope your week went very well. Hope you guys had an amazing week and you got a lot of things done and a lot of things accomplished. Today, I had to make sure that I went to church this morning. Hopefully, everybody went to church, had a good little service, and did what they needed to do today. Whether it was after church, you went and took your family out, or you had the availability to go shopping and get those groceries for the week, make that lunch for the week. Meal prepping. Everybody's doing the meal prep thing now, which I think is great. So hopefully you guys took care of all that information or took care of all those things. So I know it's a great Sunday today. We're gonna have a great Sunday, but on today we're also gonna have a very good, interesting conversation. Before I get into the conversation, though, I want to talk about the free webinar that we have for NAFME Texas. I want to make sure that I continue to have that conversation with you guys about the free webinar that's going on for NAFME Texas. That's actually going to be this Tuesday, September 14th from 6 to 9 p.m. We are having a free fall webinar. And basically, the title of that webinar is going to be "What is culturally responsive teaching and why should we care?" All right. What is culturally responsive teaching and why should we care? This is going to be headed by a very great music educator, Miss Dr. Connie McCoy. And there's going to be these little sessions that we have from 6 to about 8:30, and then we'll probably start shutting down around 8:30, and it'll end right at that time. If you want to, or if you need to register, which I would definitely say that you need to do, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the information. Give me 1 second. I'm going to post the information right here so that you all can see it, and that way it'll be available for you. Let me see if I can pull it up. Oh, it's not coming up. It's not coming up, but it's all good. What I'll do is I'll leave a link for all that information in the description. And so we'll take care of that, and you'll have all that. Once again, it's a free fall webinar for music educators. The title of the webinar is going to be "What is culturally responsive teaching and why should we care?" That is Tuesday, September 14th from 6 to 9 p.m. So make sure you check it out, register. And once again, I'll put that information in the description. All right, good. Okay, so I want to go ahead and get straight into it because there are some things that have been on my mind since we had our last show on Wednesday. For our Talk That Talk show, the panel is on here, and we have a great conversation. I think that we have really good conversations as it deals with music education, band talk, HBCU culture, all of that. But a lot of things bother me, or a lot of things stick with me when we have those conversations, and a lot of times because I want to continue to move the show forward. Or I want to be able to allow the panel to get their thoughts out. I don't get a chance to be able to really speak my mind. One of the things that stood out to me was the conversation that me and Rick had, kind of the back and forth that we had. And Rick is my best friend, man. I mean, we go way back to college days. And as a matter of fact, one of those conversations stuck out so much to me that we ended up having a conversation the next day. And it was a real discussion, man, and it was a heated discussion. And even though it was heated, I still love him. That's my boy all day. And after we finished the conversation, we started talking about football. Now, just to let you know, I know it's a football day. I know a lot of y'all are watching football right now. I don't watch the NFL. My bad, man. It's just I never have. I'm an NBA person. But one of the things that stuck out to me was, or the conversations that we had were when we were talking about educators and the school systems, and talking about low socioeconomic areas and urban areas, and what's going on as far as the band world is concerned, or the band director world. And one of the things that he definitely brought up is he's tired of the fact that everybody has an excuse, right? And we had that conversation, and one of the things that's really starting to get to me, or not necessarily get to me, just make me think is, are we complaining or are we really crying out for help, right? let's unpack that, right? Are we complaining? Or are we really crying out for help? And then when we have these conversations, um, there are a lot of schools that we can pinpoint, especially in the state of Texas, right? There are a lot of great schools out there who have very phenomenal programs, and I don't take anything away from that, right? And one of the things that we start talking about is, or we have the discussion about is talking about the kids. And one of the things that I always want to make sure that anybody knows, as far as me in music education and all of that, is the kids are available and the kids can do it, right? I don't ever believe that the kids are incapable of being successful. I don't ever in my life, and I will never in my life believe that. I believe that all kids can be successful. I believe that all kids can be able to learn this instrument or these instruments or whatever. I do believe in that, right? But I also believe that there is this thing where culture and structure is completely different. One of the things that he did say is there are no bad bands, they're just bad band directors. And I had to really sit back and I had to unpack that for a second, right? Because there are some situations that just are not conducive. Um, and when I start thinking about that, there are some great band directors in crappy situations. I mean, let's just keep it real. There are some great band directors in crappy situations, and I really think that, and especially when I start looking at low socioeconomic and urban areas, because Quan talks about this all the time when he talks about infrastructure, right? There's a lot of infrastructure that's set up that's not in place specifically for a lot of people to be successful. Now, don't get me wrong, people have had success in those areas, but a lot of the issues that I particularly start thinking about is, why do we have to have these situations like this, right? Why? So it's a lot of people who start getting in these positions and then are unprepared, right? So let's first go all the way back to the beginning, right? So we talk about education and how we're educated in our institutions, whether it's an HBCU or whether it's a predominantly white institution, it doesn't matter. We talk about how we're educated. And I don't think that in any of these education programs, and anybody out there watching, correct me if I'm wrong. You can talk in the chat, and if you want to go live, I will pin the link so you can go live with me and we can have the discussion together, right? But I just don't think that these programs are preparing us for what's really out there. I don't really think that the programs are preparing us for what's really out there at all, right? Um, and so in that, there are a lot of times when people are graduating and they're looking for these jobs. And I say this all the time. When we graduate, a lot of us who truly want to be directors, right, are really thinking about that 3A school, right? No, not that 3A school, that 6A school or that 5A school that we always dreamed of having, where most of the things are already in place and all we have to do is just go in there and teach, right? We always think about those things. But what about the situations when you don't have that? What about those situations when you walk in there and you have a program of 10, 15 kids, and that's from percussion to flute, and you have an administrator or administrators who aren't necessarily on board, and you have a community that doesn't necessarily 100% respect what you want to do and who's in line with what you want to do, right? What happens then? Are we preparing our kids in music education, as far as from the university level, to go into the classroom like that? Are we truly preparing our kids for that? And because when we get out there and we start teaching in these positions, especially when we have these positions where we are not equipped for all this, then we have to stress and struggle and do this and do that, right? Now, let me also say this: teaching is not easy. Teaching is not easy. Whether you are teaching math, English, science, reading, teaching is not easy, right? And I'm not going to, make any bones about it. Teaching is not easy. But then I also believe that on top of that, we have a lot of things going on when it relates to band, when it relates to being a band director, right? Because we have a lot more things to unpack, especially when we're talking about, and I always want to bring this up, in the state of Texas. right? Because I can only speak from the state of Texas because that's what I know. If there's anybody out there who's watching who's not from the state of Texas and you all have similar problems or similar situations, please go into the chat or go live with me. I pinned the link right there inside of the chat. If you want to hook it up and go live, if you want to cam up and we want to have the conversation, let's have the conversation, right? But when we become band directors, there are a lot of other things that we have to deal with that we're not prepared for in education from what we did in education, right? And I definitely agree with that. The real learning happens when you get in the position. And I honestly don't disagree with that. I think I definitely agree, right? But here's the thing that I'm starting to look at. And go with me when you go with me on this, right? We're not prepared when we get into the situation, or when we get out. We get into these situations, and then all of a sudden we have to, fit a circle in a square peg. Now, there are a lot of different situations. Everybody's situation isn't different. You can't compare apples to apples, right? But let's say you have this situation where you don't have the number of kids and you got to change the culture, or what if the culture that's set there is not something that you're prepared to teach? Then you got to go out and get it. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't work hard. Please, nobody think that I'm not saying that you have to work hard. But what I'm saying is a lot of people are killing themselves in these positions. A lot of people are killing themselves in these positions, right? A lot of people are starting out as young band directors, which I think is beautiful. If you start out as a young band director, you come to school and you're hungry and you hit the ground running. That's dope. I think that's great. Grind. But what about our band directors out there, and what about our music educators out there who have families? What about those who have different things that are going on? Then what? So now, and I use this analogy a lot. We spend more time with other people's kids. If you have kids, we spend time with other people's kids than we do our own kids. I've watched band directors die in the position, literally die, stressing to try to build something, stressing to try to keep it together. I've watched band directors lose families. And we got to step back for a second and ask ourselves, what are we doing? And one of the things that ends up happening is we end up saying to ourselves, well, I mean, that's just the nature of what we do. But is that okay? Is that okay to sit back and say, hey, this is what we do? Who's speaking out about this stuff? Who's saying there is an issue? Are we really? And I know a lot of us are talking to our administrators. A lot of us are getting into these conversations with our administrators. I know I have on plenty of occasions. This is not right. This is unacceptable. But then we think about our administrators, right? Data driven. We're all data. They're all data driven. And coming up on the heels of COVID, which we're still in by the way, there are so many kids who are behind. But now look at what we deal with in Texas, right? I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what we deal with in any other states. But I do know you have these P-TECH programs that are coming out. And I've experienced being a director in these P-TECH programs where now these kids are being pulled out. So if you only have if your program was, I'll say 50 kids, and you work to get those 50 kids, and we're talking about high school programs. I'm going to talk about the middle school programs in a second, but specifically high school. You're a high school program and you're trying to make it all work. And you got 50, 60 kids or whatever. Now you have a P-TECH program. And the thing about it is that P-TECH program is now pulling away from your kids or pulling away from your numbers. But then you have an administrator who's saying, we want more numbers. And now you have to figure out and reschedule and redo this and redo that to try to figure out how are we going to make this thing work. And then once again, coming up on the heels of COVID. And I think when we start looking at it, because some of us want to be great. And that's why I say there's no such thing. Well, excuse me. That's why I say they are great band directors in bad positions. There are great band directors in bad positions because we want to be great. We want to do great things. We want to be awesome. We want to take our kids to this festival and be great. We want to take our kids to this and be able to showcase them. But if we're working hard to do that and it feels like every time we're hitting a brick wall, and then we sit and we suffer in silence and we don't say anything, or we just say, oh well, that's just part of it. What do you do? And then I'm gonna tell you a story. Let me tell you the story. So when I was a high school head band director, right? And I'm going to tell you the story starting from the beginning. As a high school band director, I started out with maybe about 10 to 15 kids, in total. Pre-COVID, I had gotten them to 40. I gotten the program to about 40 kids. 10 to 15 wins. And I'm not talking about auxiliary and all that kind of stuff. No color guard. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about wins and percussion. In total, when I got there, it was 10 to 15 kids. I had gotten them up to 40. And this was pre-COVID. We went to a game one day. And at that game, the band that we were playing was I can't remember the name of the school, but they had about 100 and some odd kids. And I was like, okay, that's dope. So, I don't know how every band director does it. I know that I like to make sure that I communicate with all band directors. And I pretty basically see this everywhere, right? But I went up to the director and I just was having a conversation with him, found out he was KK Psi as well. And I talked to him and I said, hey, how I don't remember how the conversation came up. But he said, yeah, man, this is my first year teaching, head band director, getting in this program. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. Stop. Whoa, what? First year teaching, never taught before, fresh out of college, band director. And I had to take a step back for a second and do some thinking. Now, this happened maybe, I want to say 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Okay. The reason why I'm bringing this up is also during our last show, we talked about the PWI experience versus the HBCU experience as it relates to education when we leave our institutions. And one of the things that was brought up is they're not students at PWIs are not leaving, you know, and worried about going into certain areas. And that made me think, is some of the situations that we're experiencing just an HBCU thing? Is it to do, or it has to do with a lot of the fact that we're not only not fully prepping them, but not making sure they secure high quality programs? Because I don't know what happens on the other side. So I'm not going to act like I know what happens on the other side. I'm not going to act like I know what happens in PWIs. So, and I'm not going to speak on that. But what I am going to ask is this is a question that I'm asking, right? Are we not securing our students to make sure that they are getting in the best positions possible? Because what happens is, in most cases, and I'm not trying to be funny, what happens in most cases, from what I've seen from my observable eye, right? Students from PWIs graduate and they typically go to places where either A, there's a nucleus of them as directors. So, for instance, I graduate from, let's say, U of H, right? I find a position where there's 2 or more U of H graduates. Or because of the fact that they graduated from a PWI, U of H, SFA, Texas A&M, blah, 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 right? They're more likely to get the gigs that are structured. They're more likely to get the gigs where there are more supportive parents. They're more likely to get the gigs. And I'm not talking about private lessons and all that kind of stuff, right? Because I think private lessons is a situation that doesn't necessarily it happens, but I don't think it happens a lot. Like there are a few programs that I know of that have private lesson teachers on staff. But what I'm saying is they're more likely to get those gigs because of where they came from. And so it makes me wonder and it makes me think, right? How are we setting our students up from HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, to be able to go into the market? Are we setting them up for success? Are we setting them up to put them in the best positions possible? Because a lot of times I find myself communicating, because I communicate with both. I communicate with a lot of people from PWIs and I communicate with a lot of people from HBCUs. And one of the things that I end up finding out is, in most cases, the ones who graduated from HBCUs are also the ones who are in most of these situations where they literally have to build from the ground up. That's not to say that those who graduated from PWIs don't have to struggle or don't have problems. That's not what I'm saying. And I think that sometimes gets lost in context, right? Because there are those who graduate from PWIs who are in the low socioeconomic areas. However, it's like Quan said, just because, or not some low socioeconomic, but Title I. And it's just like Quan said, just because you're in a Title I, that doesn't mean the kid can't play, and it doesn't mean that everybody's poor, right? And so we got to look at that. So when I start looking at that, I think it becomes a Title I versus the urban low socioeconomic areas, because I think we're talking two different things on that, right? Because there are Title I schools where there are massively supportive parents. There are Title I schools where you have a lot of buy-in because of the culture that is already set, either whether it's in the community or whether it's at the school. But then you have the low socioeconomic urban areas, right, where you don't have a lot of buy-in from parents. You have those areas where the administration wants to see one thing: numbers, and we play the numbers game, right? And then we have this thing called UIL. Now, if you're not from Texas, UIL, and we had this conversation on the show, then you got this thing called UIL. UIL is another thing, because in a lot of areas, especially in the state of Texas, the requirement is that you have to be successful, or at least you have to go. And then you have to be successful. So then the question becomes, what exactly are we doing right now? Are we suffering in silence? We're sitting up here trying to work hard and killing ourselves in order to try to present something. And then we sit back, and then after we've grown 15 gray hairs in one year, we sit back and say, yes, this is why I do this. To grow gray hairs. Don't get me wrong. You do it for the kids. You do. And I never ever take anything away from that, right? But then we have to I start looking at why we even got in the profession in the first place. Is the passion that we had. We wanted to create beautiful music. We wanted to create and shape sounds. Whether you are a middle school beginning band director or a high school marching band director or whatever, we wanted to create music because it's what we love to do. And what ends up happening in a lot of these areas, more often than not, we're doing less of that and more stressing. We're doing 10% of the music aspect, the thing that we are really trying to do, and we're spending more time stressing. And I keep asking myself, are we suffering in silence? Are we having these feelings and these thoughts, but we're just saying, well, that's part of the gig, so yeah. And I think that that's unacceptable. I think it's unacceptable. There are good programs out there. Don't get me wrong. And some of those good programs do go through things. And I don't even like that idea of thinking that just because I feel this way, I don't believe that there are good programs and there are successful programs, but there are some programs where a lot of these people who are in these good programs, if they were to switch places, it would be a completely different story. So I look at that. So how do we solve that? How do we solve it? How do we put people in place to make sure or to ensure that there is a good work going on from the director side? Because I never want to take the onus off of the director. The director will always have accountability, right? But how do we make sure also that the administration and the director are in line, are aligned, right? Because I think that sometimes kills a lot of what happens. There is a lack of alignment between the administrator and the director. Are we sharing the same vision? Do we have the same goals? And I have to also remember that every administrator is different. But then it brings up the question: what is the purpose of the fine arts director? From what I know, every fine arts director is different. Some fine arts directors just kind of sit back and say, "This is what you need. This is what you need. I'll take care of you. This is what you need." And can be an advocate for that band director, right? But then there are some fine arts directors saying, "Well, I don't. I will suggest that this is what needs to happen, and I will give you the guidelines, but you got to fight your own fight." So it makes me question: what is the purpose of the fine arts director? Are they an advocate for what you do? Are they an advocate for when you are struggling or when you've hit a wall? Are they there to be able to be there to talk for you, to speak for you, to help you out, to say, "Hey, Mr. Principal or Mrs. Principal, so and so, this is the issue. What can we do to resolve this? Let's meet at the middle so we can all have, be on common ground." And I want to be able to solve these problems, right? Because I want every group to flourish, whether you're 3A, 4A, 5A, or 6A. Does that mean that every person or every program is going to be phenomenal at a festival? Absolutely not. Festival UIL, however you call it. Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, and I agree with Dangerous MCs or what he said, you leave the work at work. I do agree with that. And I had to make a conscious decision about 7 years ago. About 7 years ago, I had to make a conscious decision to leave the work at work. But there was a difference, though. Let me tell you what the difference was, and why I made that conscious decision. Because I had kids. I had a child. And what became more important to me was my child and what my child needed from me. So that's why I made that conscious decision. But there are a lot of people who are not making that decision for whatever reason. Some people believe that I need to work myself to death in order to build the success that I need from this program. Work hard, yes. By all means, work hard. Work yourself to death. I just don't agree with that. You should love what you do. And I think we fooled ourselves into thinking that loving what we do means that we have to darn near kill ourselves, stress ourselves, build anxiety, grow gray hairs, and die in positions to be able to say, this is what I love. And I just disagree with that. And I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe I'm thinking about it in a completely different way. But there are too many band directors who are struggling. There are band directors out there, and we've had this discussion before on the show. There are band directors out there who are teaching band, auxiliary, choir, all of that. And when they have a discussion with their administrators, the administrators are giving them no leeway, no let go, no nothing. There are band directors out there who are teaching music theory classes or music appreciation classes, and maybe 1 or 2 band classes, maybe. But then telling them, but then the administrator is telling them, we want your band program to be successful with no help, no nothing. And while I'm on it, let me go back to this beginning band in high school thing. When I made that statement, understand that I made that statement specifically, one, talking about Texas schools, right? And I said that within the comment, right? When I said it. But the other thing was, when I talk about beginning band in high school, I don't believe, and this is just my personal opinion, when I talk about beginning band in high school, if you have a structure and a system in place, if you have a great if you have a great middle school feeder, then I think that at that point, no, you shouldn't have it in high school. But then we got to ask ourselves, if we don't have a great middle school feeder, what's going on with our middle school programs? And I can tell you what's going on with our middle school programs. A lot of people who, once again, went to these programs, these institutions, who had these ice cream dreams, graduated and wanted the 5A, 6A school. They didn't want to deal with beginners. They didn't want to start over. They wanted to put them kids out there on Friday night or Thursday night or Saturday night and be able to say, this is my band and blah, 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 blah. Then they get to middle school and they're depressed, they're upset, they're frustrated because this is not what they wanted to do, and they're not preparing the kids. And what they try to do is they try to make a small marching band out of these middle school kids by teaching the drummers how to do flashes with cymbals and beat the heck out of the drum, and not really teaching them rudiments and not teaching them how to read, or just not caring at all. And then they get to the high school and the high school kids are not prepared. Then you got to teach beginning band. That's what's happening. Is that every situation? Absolutely not. Is that a lot of situations? Yes. Is that every situation? No. Is that many situations? Yes. But how do we solve it? How do we solve it? There are so many people out there who are just completely oblivious to a lot of things that's going on, because they stay in their bubble and they communicate with people who are like-minded, who are in their same situations. And don't get me wrong, I've had the communications with them, so those same people. That doesn't mean that I don't care about what's happening with everybody else. That doesn't mean I don't care about what's happening with other people. But some people are just oblivious. When I posted the video about teaching high school, beginning band in high school, there were some people who responded and were like, I can't even fathom teaching high school, beginning band in high school. How do we solve it? Are we suffering in silence? Should we want better for our own personal selves, our own well-being? We're in a situation of COVID. Health is definitely something that a lot of people are looking at right now, whether it's COVID related or not. Health, longevity, life is something that people are looking strongly at. The question is, when we put ourselves in these positions, are we thinking about our health? Or are we thinking about job security? Or are we thinking about the kids? Or are we thinking about the program? These are all things that I think about daily. Are we considering our health when we're in these positions? And we're staying up till, 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, trying to figure out if Lil Johnny has a horn to play, trying to figure out if Michael knows his music, trying to replot drill, trying to think, are we prepared for UIL? Can our kids sight read? What's the next step? Now, I will say one thing. Rick did bring up a good point, and I got to give him a lot of credit on this one. Planning. How are you planning? How you plan is going to determine what your success is in a lot of cases. In every case, no. But how are you planning? What does your plan look like? Are we going in and we winging it every day? Is that what we're doing? We got to ask ourselves that. And we got to talk about culture. What culture are we setting? Is the culture set? We determine the culture of our programs. I'm not even talking about outside of our program. I'm not talking about the community. What does our culture look like? And are we consistent? Are we consistent? Now there's another question that comes up. Do our students care? Do our students care? Now, understand what I mean by that. A kid in a low socioeconomic urban area who doesn't have any food at home in most cases are not worried about if we're playing, this bot tune correct. Do the students care? Are you making it accessible to them? Are you making it fun for them? Are you making it enjoyable for them? Now, one thing that we all did agree on the show, band is hard. Band is hard, especially when you're talking about beginning band, right? But band is hard. So how are we making it conducive for them? Are we making it in a way that connects to them? Or are we just doing or following the guidelines or the expectation? These are all questions that I ask myself. Can a student who cares not, matter of fact, let me put it in a different way. Can a student who parents don't live with them, one's in jail, one's dead, lives with granny, do they care? Have you done the steps or taken the steps to make them care? Have you put something in place that shows that you care? Now, here's the other half of that. What does the administration want from you? Does the administration align with the vision that you have? So let me really paint that picture for you, right? You have these students, you have your program. And I used this analogy one time. You have your program. You're walking into a program brand new and you're assessing what you have. You're assessing what you have, and 90% of your students cannot play. But your administrator wants you to go to festival. How do you pull that off? And I'm not saying the kids are not incapable, and I'm not saying you're not capable, but how do you pull that off? It's just you. No staff, no help, no, it's just you. How do you pull that off? And you're gonna have to work. I don't, and I think this is a misconception, right? And I said this earlier. There's a difference between hard work and killing yourself. It's a fine line, but it's a difference. So what's your suggestion? What's your suggestion? If you're out here watching this and you're listening, what's your suggestion? And that goes back to the original question that I asked. Are we complaining or are we crying for help? Are we suffering in silence? Are we saying that this is the job? And if it is it right? Should we just accept that? Because one of the things that bothers me is I have colleagues who are doing great. I have colleagues who are doing great jobs and who are successful. And I have colleagues who are struggling and who are working their tails off to be successful. And they look across the way and they say, well, this person has this, that, and the third. And then they say, well, I don't have X, Y, and Z. This person has 3 people on staff. I have myself, or I only have 2 of us, or whatever. So there are situations where, there's differences. But what can we do to ensure that everybody has the availability to succeed without killing themselves? What can we do? Everybody has a right or should have the availability to be successful. Everybody. But I just believe that everybody's not placed in that position. That's my personal opinion. Every position, and we know this, every position is not created for you to succeed. There are a lot of positions that are created for people to fail. So how do we combat that? I don't know. There has to be an answer. I think there is an answer. I'm not going to give you the answer, but I think there is an answer. But we can talk about it. We're going to keep these discussions up because I think they need to be had. I really do. Are we suffering in silence? Are we suffering in silence? It ain't complain. Is it complaining? Or are we crying for help? All right. Once again, NAFME Texas is holding a free fall webinar. Let's get in on this webinar, guys. If you're somebody who's looking for some information, get in on the webinar. Free fall webinar. What is culturally responsive teaching and why should we care? What is culturally responsive teaching and why should we care? Get in on this webinar. NAFME Texas is holding this Tuesday, September 14th from 6 to 9 p.m. And it's free. Free. Doesn't cost anything. You just got to register. That's as much as you need. It's free. All you have to do is register. Let me see if I can get this thing in here. If not, yeah, it's not letting me up. Put it up in here. It's not letting me put it up, but it's all good. Like I said, I'll put the link for that in the description of this video once the video goes up, or excuse me, once I get off of here. But hey, man, I really enjoyed being able to talk with you guys. Appreciate you, Dangerous MCs, for being able to come in and have the conversation. There's nothing wrong with that. I want more people to come in and have the conversation. I'm going to be posting this up. I'm going to chop it up, man. And it's okay. Like I said, if you disagree, you disagree. And that's cool. I don't have a problem with you disagreeing because we're not always going to agree on everything. But there are some people out there who agree. And for those people who do agree, then the question still remains, are we suffering in silence? Are we suffering in silence? Are we complaining, or are we crying out for help? And remember this, everything ain't rainbows. Everything ain't always sunshine and rainbows. There are some great programs out there. There are some great directors out there, and hats off to you. I think you guys are doing an amazing job. I'm only talking about secondary. We're not talking about university teacher right now. I'm only talking about secondary, middle school, high school. There are some great directors out there. There are some directors who are out there doing a great job. Great kids. Every kid can be great. But like I said, I just believe that there are some great directors in some really crappy situations. Are we suffering in silence? Are we complaining, or are we really crying out for help? Till next time. See you guys Wednesday. For Talk That Talk. I'm prepared to have a great show. We had a great show last time. Look for some clips to go up today. We're gonna have some clips from Talk That Talk going up, as well as some clips from today. You can go ahead and keep watching. Go ahead and play it back. Leave your comments, man. I look at the comments. I like to try to, converse with you guys in the comments. So leave your comments. I appreciate you guys for listening. I'll see you guys Wednesday for Talk That Talk.